Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody. I think it's time we blow this scene. Get everybody in the thoughts together, okay? 3, 2, 1, let's jam. Who do we have here tonight? I am your host, John Garcia. I feel significantly cooler after watching this recent movie. I don't know if it's just because it's got a good nostalgic vibe to me, or if it's all of the jazz and noir or the Western stuff, but I'm excited to talk about this film. But with me here on the episode is Ryan King.
Hey, yeah, how's it going? I'm definitely interested in talking about this. Whatever happens, happens. It's a quote from the TV show.
I love bringing TV show quotes to a movie discussion.
Movie version,
Ryan.
yeah.
Full class. No.
The quotes from the
and
movie
also
are
joining
way
us,
too long, like convoluted, dreaming.
You have to give
shit.
a monologue.
Yes.
It's like a Mike Flanagan show. Yeah, and also joining us is Michael Dixon.
What's up? I'm excited to talk about this COVID origin story movie.
Yeah, and we are talking about, we're continuing our anime discussions leading up to The Boy and the Heron that's coming out in December by exploring a few more samplings of genres, and one of them is a fusion of genres called Cowboy Bebop.
Oh yeah, it's happening.
72 are confirmed dead and 425 injured.
Under those circumstances, we certainly can't rule out the possibility of
The
bioterrorism.
government of Mars has posted a reward of 300 million wulong.
Head bandit!
What the hell is it?
Playtime's over. Put your hands behind your head.
Go on, pull the trigger. I blow the bounty if I blow you away. Say your prayers.
What are you?
Just a humble bounty hunter, ma'am.
In particular, the film we're talking about is Cowboy Bebop: the movie, or what the previous title was, Cowboy Bebop Knockin' on Heaven's Door, which is a Bob Dylan song that they were like, we can't use that. Bob Dylan doesn't want you to do that. So yeah, Cowboy Bebop: the movie it fits right into the middle of the television series, but you don't have to have seen the TV show to actually appreciate it. It tells the story of 4 bounty hunters, or I should say 3 adult bounty hunters, a dog, and a hacker girl that's fucking insane.
Mm-hmm.
And in the movie, they all come to Mars, this like piece of Mars that's been colonized in the future, the far off year of 2071. And there's somebody in this city that they're trying to find who has a bounty on his head. And it turns out that another bounty pops up. This guy who basically is committing terrorist acts using some kind of bioweapon, exploding tankers and such, and causing like mass murder waves, I guess. I don't know. He's just like killing people and they're all choking out. And everybody, the Martian government puts a bounty out, which made you laugh, Dixon, when you heard that the government of Mars was putting a
I didn't know where we were in the movie. And then they're like, the Martian government. I turned like, what the fuck? What is going on? And then later in the movie, I was like, John, where is this set? This seems like a very metropolitan place, or, a very city of the world. And like, oh, it's on Mars. I'm like, oh, okay. That makes sense why they have like a sub neighborhood of town for every single ethnicity on Earth. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So the movie is really like, it's pretty simple in terms of the story. It's trying to figure out, who is this guy, trying to capture him, get the bounty on his head. Like, it's following this gang. It introduces a number of other characters. Some of them, if you see the TV show, reappear. Others are completely new, including the villain and this woman that like Spike Spiegel, the main, I guess for intents and purposes of this story, the main character runs into. But yeah, it's an ensemble cast sort of adventure. If you're wondering, like, I think Dixon, right before you were like, do I need to know anything? You've seen like one episode before this. I showed you like the first episode.
And that was a
the
few
series.
years ago, so
Yeah.
I didn't remember much.
So it was pretty fuzzy, but one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is one, I love the series. I really love the concept of like genre fusion, and I think that anime has a great space to play with that and to pull from other genres in film and recreate them or pay homage to them in like really beautiful ways, and it can be pretty profound and interesting. And especially in this one, this movie was made not shortly, but like a few years after the series had concluded. And fans and critics were like, hey, what if we got like one more thing? Could there be like a little bit more to the Cowboy Bebop story and the universe? And so the studio decided, yeah, we're going to make a movie and we're going to do things we couldn't do with the show. So a lot of it has like these really cool shots that are like simulating actual film cameras. They have like wide angle lenses. They have like anamorphic shots. They have really cool POV shots. Like the animation is buttery smooth and has these really cool fight sequences to it that just have stuck in my mind. Like between like the train sequence and even the opening sequence in like that convenience store. They're just really memorable action pieces and moments. And the characters are all quick-witted and cool. And it fluctuates between being very serious and at other times being lighthearted. And I feel like it does it in a way that doesn't break the rest of the film and maintains like Cowboy Bebop's essence. So if you watch the movie and you're like, I like that, I liked the experience, there were parts of it I didn't understand, but I'd be down to watch more of it, then it's a good entryway and a good gateway to the series. And if you didn't, then I still feel like it's pretty fun action. It does drag a few places, which is why I don't think it's like a perfect movie. There's some of it that feels like it could have been cut down a bit. But kind of miraculous. Like, I don't know, for me, having seen the series and wanting more of it, this movie gave me more without needing to open a whole other can of like questions and have me come back for a second season or something. And if you've never seen it before, it seems to serve a really good purpose of like an entry point to like, this is what an anime could be. This is what it could have in it. And these are like really cool elements from a sci-fi world. But that's my take. And I'd love to hear more. I think we should probably save Dixon's take for last. I'd like to hear from our resident anime expert, who we have kicked to it several times. Ryan, what do you think about Cowboy Bebop : the movie?
Yeah, for background, I've watched the show through I don't know how many times. And I first got the series back in the like 99 or 2000, right? Kind of, and this movie came out in what, 98?
Yeah. Yep.
And it
came out 2001.
2001. Yeah,
I can't,
it's in that time frame. I can't remember, but I know
You're on
that
the ground floor is what you're saying.
Yes. Oh, I know for the movie that I had a Chinese knockoff DVD. This is hard to like. I don't think that's on anything streaming. You mostly need a physical media, and I guess the physical media I still have is a Chinese knockoff DVD. Because I bought like a box set, and the box set actually was all legitimate discs and one Chinese bootleg version of the movie, and that's what they sold on eBay. Somebody scammed me, I guess. I don't really care. I've also listened to the soundtrack a ton of times. Like Yoko Kanno's music's fucking awesome. It's a different take in the movie. This very much is a longer episode of Cowboy Bebop. It doesn't really feel like it missed a beat. It is pretty common, especially back turn of the century, for anime to have what they called an OAV or OVA that would come out sometime after a series had ended. That was a movie, just kind of like almost usually like a longer episode or something sort of after the series, but not a major departure. And so this fits in it. I think this was supposed to be like maybe a 90-minute or 71-minute, somewhere much shorter kind of OVA that was just going to go to video, and then they extended it to feature length. And I think that's where you can kind of see like it got stretched a bit.
Yeah.
But like this absolutely is exactly what an episode of Cowboy Bebop is like. They get tangled up in something, they fuck up all their own shit and spend all their own money trying to get a bounty or something that ends up just getting messed up to where they can't get paid or barely get paid. And we get some sort of villain that we, kind of can maybe start to sympathize with in some ways, but they have this warped vision of how they go about things. And you kind of, continue to see Spike kind of wrestle with his demons of his past. And in each character, usually so many episodes are just on another character entirely. This is very much a Spike movie. like through and through. The other cast is there and they do their little bits, but this is mostly Spike and our new characters. This is maybe like the third time I've seen this. I always remember enjoying it, and I remember the fight scenes for sure. The open, the fight with the broom, and the train. And when we talked about this before, I was just like, the train, like, immediately goes back in my mind. And maybe some of the better fight scenes from Cowboy Bebop as a whole. And the way that they're, the animation quality and the way that they're animated and flow in this movie is really awesome and just shows like the maximum of what they can do. It has some like interesting like opening sequence and street shots that are way more realistic and less cartoony than the show, which is also kind of interesting. And I feel like a bit of a flex on the creator's part. I will say that like the downs of it does drag a little bit. There's not much clarity, and this is common in the show, of like how the fuck they're figuring things out. They sort of just continue to stumble into new things and new information. It just kind of feels like the plot needs to move forward, so somebody figures something out in some weird way. And then I would say the villain's motives are not quite fully explored. Like, we know why he's fucked up, but we don't really know why he's doing what he's doing in
Fucking
particular.
other people up.
Yeah, he just talks a lot about heaven and death and dreaming and stuff, but it's not really clear what the connection is, though seemingly he's lost his mind, so that's maybe not the worst thing. He is actually supposed to look like Bob Dylan, because almost usually every character, I think pretty much every character, is based on some real life, often musician, that the director Watanabe wants them to look like. And so it's supposed to be Bob Dylan. I don't think this is a very good Bob Dylan. Some of his other characters do really look on point, but yeah.
I call him Scraggly John Wick.
Yeah, that's actually probably pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah,
John Wick let his hair go. John Stick. Darla watched this. She kind of came in and out on it. She's watched maybe 5 or 6 episodes of Cowboy Bebop, and she did enjoy the show. We just hadn't finished it and kind of moved on to other things. And she kind of came in and out, but towards the end just kind of got hooked into like, where's this going, and the action and all that, and saw it through. So I think she kind of gave it like a weird, to like what exactly was going on, but still enough to keep her captivated.
Yeah. Nice.
Cool.
That's a glowing Darla review if ever I've heard one.
Yeah.
You can't get
I watched
better than that. Yeah, there you go.
That's got to be like top 5% of all the things that we've watched for Darla, right? Like,
yeah,
if it's like, and it's not like, who picked this? Like,
yeah,
she doesn't
that
want
was
to
not
know
asked.
names.
Yeah, surprisingly, that was not asked. Yeah,
she probably just assumed it was you.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, cool. Dixon, what did you think? This was your first time seeing this, and you've only watched one episode before.
Yeah, and I didn't really remember anything from that episode except for some of the aesthetics. I know we watched one episode right after we watched the movie, John. And I don't remember if the movie had this or the show, but the intro theme song I thought was really cool, and it's like exactly the Archer theme song.
Oh, that's in the show.
Okay, that's not in the movie, but I was like, oh, that's really cool. And like Archer came out like 10 years later. And so like there's clearly some influence here into modern American animation. The style is just really interesting, kind of the combination of like noir and espionage and Western all together. It's got like the kind of cool, aloof noir characters with the, kind of biting dialogue, and then the Western aspect of the bounty hunter that is kind of going around and trying to find the collect the reward on people. I thought it was cool. It was well done. I think the characters were a little flat, and that is, I think, sometimes a problem that noirs fall into, where the emphasis is on the style and the dialogue and the writing, and the cinematography and the lighting and everything. And I think sometimes the characters get a little overlooked in favor of snappy dialogue. And I felt like that kind of happened here. I feel like the best noirs are able to transcend that and have really interesting characters. And that's difficult to do when you're trying to stick to a style so hard and kind of do that at, that's the premium, the number one thing they're going for is achieving the style. And I think they do that really well. The plot is interesting. It's kind of all over the place. Like there's a lot of characters and there's a lot of pieces to follow. I have no idea what the fuck Edward is or what was going on there. This
And
weird
Darla was like, was Ed that noodly in the show? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, no, she was not that noodly. I was like, yeah, nah, I don't think she was.
She's always been
She's
that
pretty noodly, yeah.
Yeah, like some sort of idiot savant who can like hack into anything and answer every question, but like can't hold a conversation or like, stand in one place for longer than 5 seconds. So yeah, I mean, there's so many weird characters and random little plot holes that you go down that it kind of comes together at the end, but some of the stuff doesn't really make it all the way through. I thought the ending was interesting. About halfway through the movie, or I guess when they first introduced the like big pharma CEO, I turned to John and I was like, so this guy's the villain and Scraggly John Wick is like the decoy villain, right? Like he's actually a good guy or something. And John was like, oh, well, you're not really, but you may be right on the first point. But as we go through, like it becomes very clear that the big pharma company is the evil institution in this movie that is creating these, evil nanobot virus marbles and distributing them out through the world. And this guy is either a patsy or is kind of just becoming a nuisance to them, and they're trying to get rid of him. And they have like corporate assassins that they are sending after him to neutralize him. And at the end of the movie, we just kind of forget about that, and they like, capture John Stick and save the day and spray everyone with vaccine, and then they're all like, yay, we're done. And then you're like, wait a minute. Wait, why are we not going back to the big pharma CEO's office and punching him in the dick? Where's that scene? What's
are we going to follow up with the 8,000 that Potter has? Why would we?
Yeah, exactly. We got to go get Mr. Potter. But I mean, that's kind of how these things go, I guess, right? Like in real life, you never actually take down the big pharma CEO. You just take down the low-level drug dealers that are pushing their products. So I don't know if that's trying to have some sort of commentary or if it's just like kind of a convenient way to wrap up the story. It didn't feel like it was trying to make a statement or anything. It just felt like it was kind of trying to do its thing and have a good time. And I had a good time with it. So, overall, I enjoyed the experience.
Nice. Yeah. A lot of the Bebop episodes don't end with like a pretty bow tied on things. Like there's kind of a reset that happens, but usually they're like the entire series is kind of like watching these characters endure different kinds of trauma and watching it chip away at like who they are and what their dynamic is. And so it's interesting. Yeah. Like being on kind of the inside looking out and hearing you talk about how like the movie itself felt like it had flat characters. And I'm like, but I know all of these characters. I've seen them.
And maybe that's you just have to build that over the course of watching the show, and I don't have that. So
there's like that kind of depth that gets added. But like I once had a friend who complained to me, Ryan, you and I worked with him previously at some point, but he was like, oh, I watched Cowboy Bebop and I didn't get it. I kind of stopped watching it because like they didn't really have good arcs for episodes. And he was like, they didn't really tell me where we were going for the episodes. Like, he was like, why would I follow all these people on their adventures if they never get like any kind of success or they never win or something happens? And I was like, it's a lot more nuanced than that. Like the noir aspects of it keep it from being like good guys win at all times. Like they have several episodes of like eco-terrorists or other like factions that they run into, or like the greatest hacker who committed all these crimes and he's now a senile old man who can't remember anybody's name. Like, but yeah, so it definitely, it's like, it rings out for me. I'm like, oh, that's funny that the characters are like, yeah, when you look at this movie as it is, like, it really just does push you through a plot with characters that you've never really known. And you're having to draw on like a few stylistic choices for each character. Like the fact that Ed literally noodles, like there's like waves that go through Ed that nobody else has. They're all just rigid animation for other characters.
Ed is all cartilage.
Yeah. Just full of, Ed is just full of cocaine. It's eating away at all of the bones.
It's all that Halloween candy.
I do think it's, the fact that this is coming after a show that has fleshed out all these characters, except maybe Ed and definitely Ein, who is this hyper-realistic dog compared to everyone else, honestly, the way he's animated. But in the show, these become fully like well-realized characters over the course of the show. You really get all the sides of them. Often if they do bump up against something bigger, kind of like a systemic problem, they don't really care or necessarily go about fixing it. It kind of just is. Like, Spike doesn't give really much of a shit about anything. Faye only gives a shit about money, and Jet's the only one that has any kind of maybe code of honor. And so, yeah, it's just sort of like they're after the 300 million in this movie, and that's it. They don't really care.
There's
There's
their
no
whole objective.
Yeah, no one's paying them to take down the Martian government or this pharmaceutical company or whatever, right? So they just don't even really care.
It's honestly pretty bold when you think about it, Ryan, for like the movie to start. I guess like it knows that it's going to be fans that go see it, but like Dixon, I wonder how you felt at the beginning because having seen a bunch of Westerns and everything, that opening sequence with the convenience store where that guy comes out and takes an old woman hostage and Spike is like, I don't give a shit. Like, I really don't care about this person. Like, what was your kind of impressions on that?
Yeah, I definitely felt like there was some specifically spaghetti Western influence here, like the Clint Eastwood, Sergio Leone vibe of the bounty hunter that just doesn't care. They just don't give a fuck about anything. And they're coming in to make their money and move on. And they don't really care about anybody else. And yeah, I thought that scene was great. Just a very tense action sequence. And then you have a dumb bad guy who stands next to his victim instead of behind her and then gets shot in the face. But
a lot of soda cans that fall on him and all.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, I interrupted you. Do you remember? Did you hold it?
No, I was going to say, I think you do get enough to kind of get the basic beats of who these characters are, right? Like that opening scene kind of gets you the like Jet, and then you get when they're playing shogi and you kind of get the like, okay, Jet wants to kind of plan things out and he has kind of a set of rules and Spike just kind of is in the moment. And you don't even know, like, does he legitimately not care if that old lady dies, or does he just say that shit to fuck with that guy? Like, you don't really ever know what he's actually thinking in that situation. I do feel like the movie doesn't flesh out our other two new characters, the villain, and wow, I remember her name, Electra. They don't get necessarily fleshed out, which I think is strange because I can think of so many Cowboy Bebop episodes that introduce a villain and give them like a very detailed, well-rounded, get you to care about them kind of thing in one fucking episode, and there's a few where it's like over the course of 2 episodes, and that's still less runtime than this. So I'm thinking like Sympathy for the Devil or like Heavy Metal Queen or whatever. Like those, you get the full character in one go, and by the end, you're like kind of sympathetic for them and sad that they go down, right? Like in a way. So I do miss them. Like the movie doesn't quite hit that note that I think it could with the amount of time it has. Because I think of those like 2-parter episodes, and they absolutely are amazing standalone and could be the quality of a movie.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because like I never really thought about it, or like I guess I never really had as much of a desire to see those characters fleshed out. I don't know. It's usually the case that I would welcome there being some more backstory to some characters, but it seems like at times they give you just enough to go. Like that's what this movie does for most of its characters. Is like it gives you enough. And they get rotated in, and I guess they don't have the prestige of 26 episodes before them to let you know who they are. But it's still like we get a moment in a jail cell between Spike and Electra where they talk about past loves and how like Vincent was her past love, and she gives just enough for us to see. It's almost like using Spike as a mirror on both of them, like reflecting into their characters and trying to pull depth from that, which is kind of an interesting approach to it. But I think that like the fact that they also they have other villains in it too, like what is his name? Spooky Donkey, Sporky Donkey, Spooky Donkey,
whatever the hacker kid,
Lee. I think his name was Lee, who like in like a few moments, you just get an idea of exactly who the fuck this kid is. Which was another thing that I was like, I don't think there's a character I don't remember in it. Like even the dude who asks Electra for a date, like I'm just like, yeah, that guy, he was there because like, why would you do a DNA? He would like trade a DNA exam for some kind of fucking date. You're like, yeah, I'll look at your blood.
The misogyny's alive in 50 years.
It's like, all right, there it is. But yeah.
Is the donkey? Is he the dude who's playing like the old video game?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to do some terrorism.
Yeah. He's like, thanks
Yeah.
for providing me with this opportunity to do terrorism. he's always wanted to know how it feels. Which he also just has a brutal death. Like that scene is so fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of like, the violence doesn't come as often. Like the fight choreography and everything happens, but like when hard violence happens, it immediately sucks the air out of the room. Like I noticed like the score would give out and they would let like the Foley just like echo. I think like even for the security guard who stops them right before that kid, after that kid's like, thanks for letting me do terrorism with you. Security guard's like, I need to see your ID, and just gets his brains blown out and his body just flies and skids across the concrete. It's so brutally animated. But it happens in like a flash and it's just done.
Yeah.
Like, man.
The opening scene at the convenience store, I asked you, John, I was like, is Jet a cyborg? Like, what's going on with that? Because he has this like massive metal arm and like something metal thing on his face. And Spike turns to him, he's like, you told me there were 3 guys. What the fuck, dude? And he's like, I'm sorry, the information that's provided is to help both sides or something. And I was like, what the fuck is this thing? Is this some sort of intel robot that is like scouted the area and like is only providing a certain amount of information to not advantage one side over the other? I was like, what's happening here?
It's totally just Jet has a code of honor, but he also has a sense of pride that won't let him admit certain things, like when he's fucking wrong.
Like how he can't stand to lose at chess.
Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah, those are all those like you get a few segments of that. Like, yeah, he tries to pull the art of war shit is what Spike refers to it as, where he's just like, yeah, disinformation is necessary for allies and enemies. Yeah. And then later he's like, Shogi's a game of patience and looking ahead. I want to move this way. Let's go back a few turns. Yeah. And then even later when Ed's like, are you waiting for a call? And he's like, no, I'm not waiting for a call. And she's like, oh, I thought you were, because like Spike and Faye are out. And he's like, are they out? I didn't even know. And Faye calls immediately and he answers and he's like, where are you? What's happening? There's these moments where it's like he has a hardened shell and the show fleshes it out a lot more. It also mentions in the movie, like he talks to a buddy of his. They go to a drive-in where they're watching like
they're watching High
Western.
Noon.
Yeah, High Noon, which is that whole sequence is directed by a different director, as was like the opening credits, which is pretty fascinating.
I was gonna say real quick, because we talked about that. They animate High Noon to have them watching it, and immediately my mind went to the Ninja Turtles movie from earlier this year, John, where they're watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and I was like, how awesome would it have been if they animated Ferris Bueller's Day Off scene like that, to do like that?
Yeah.
That would have been cool.
That would have been great. Like,
except they definitely turned Gary Cooper into Clint Eastwood when they animated it. It was like, that's not Gary Cooper.
They definitely used some different faces, which was like another thing I heard was people speculated like those sequences. I think the Western and the intro cards, people speculated were rotoscoped, but they're not. They're all hand drawn, which is wild.
Definitely.
But yeah, like Jet sitting in that just cool world building, showing what like cineplexes have become with flying cars now. They're just like tiered masses where you like can park and watch the drive-in. But yeah, Jet talking with his partner or like former coworker or whatever about the ISSP, which is, I believe, I looked it up, Dixon. It's the like Intersolar Space Police or some shit.
I guess the International Space Station Police, but that didn't really make sense. So.
Yeah. The International Space Station is still out there somewhere. It's still good.
Yeah, there's like 6 people shitting in bags up there.
It's just a little shitty. It's still good. But yeah, like Jet's like asking him about how life is on the Force, and alluding to all these old times Jet used to be a cop, and he's just like, it's not what you remember. We're all just like pushing papers, trying to get promotions. It's about people climbing corporate ladders.
They're all just working with the gangs anyway.
Yeah. And like selling out tips and drugs and whatever to the syndicates. And Jet's like, that's why I left. So it's like these cool little tidbits where you're like, this whole world is like as clean as some places look. Like when you get to the edges of the city, like those things that maintain life within it are really like spotless and clean, and you can tell that that's maintained to keep life in, but everything that's inside is like this bustling city of life, and there's grime and dirt like everywhere, and you've got corrupt individuals doing fucking crimes and all that. Doesn't have any doesn't have a space age feel. Like Dixon kind of felt it was metropolitan.
Yeah, I didn't even notice until they like got on the highway and they like leave the terraformed bubble and they're just in these tubes and you just see like red dirt everywhere around them.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what, like, I don't feel like Cowboy Bebop is cyberpunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a tradition, but it is kind of that, like, I was thinking about it when I was watching and I was like, it's almost like grime punk, grunge punk, because it's like there is this city to it and there's the blend of cultures that you kind of see, especially in like a Blade Runner, right? The Asian culture, Western culture kind of blend, and everything's like a little actually lived in, like the little shops that are just like crammed in there and things like that feel like realistic, but it's not really quite to the, I don't know, post-apocalyptic, you know, post-human world of the cyberpunk.
It's not as dystopian as you thought it would be. It just feels like it kind of, it's like, oh, humanity just kept going on and we moved to other planets. Just as shitty. Like, we're just as shitty as we were before. I mean, like in the show, Tijuana is now on an asteroid. Like that's like a whole thing. Yeah. It's just a city that you can go to. And like,
did it like get jettisoned from Earth somehow, or is it like they just made another city on an asteroid?
I think they just made like Tijuana. A new Tijuana, more or less.
Yeah, so Earth became like uninhabitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, Earth got fucked by some like space gate that blew up and some other shit that happened, and it's a whole thing that gets explained over the course of several different episodes, and none of it is told to you. That's the other thing I appreciate about the show is nobody hits you over the head with exposition. Like I think at one point, Dixon, you were like, why is he asking about beans, like about Spike? and it's because like the show talks in those euphemisms too. Like they use what in that world would be a terminology that could get you like a lead. And I appreciate kind of having to figure out and catch up to that. We talked about like how my favorite thing about noir is when a noir doesn't tell me what's happening and when I get lost in it. And then like, if you watch it again, you're like, I understand now, like here's the bits I can piece together. I appreciated a lot of that. And I feel like even watching this movie again, doesn't like it's still there's parts I'm discovering or pieces of like the character dialogue I'm latching onto more. And I feel like the monologues as like some of the as like heady as some of them can get and like heavy handed in some ways about, you know, with Vincent talking about heaven and everything. I still feel like they're so well written that I could just listen to it like again and again. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a cool villain monologue. This is some cool shit. But yeah, that was, I don't know, like this is the one thing that going back to it, I really appreciated.
Also the vocabulary aspect of it, like that feels almost like a gangster movie to some degree too, where it's like, you know, you're like Scorsese does that a lot in his movies where
you paint houses.
You have, I heard you paint houses and they don't ever tell you what that means, right? Like there are things like that, you know, we just use weird terminology that you can infer what it means based on people's inflection and their voices and their intonations, and you don't need everything defined for you to explain it.
Yeah, I liked,
or like you got to tell them it's what it is, and like immediately De Niro knows, like, oh, that means I got to kill this fucking guy. Like, you know, it's just
yeah. I really liked that part about when Spike was looking for any kind of lead. Again, like sort of Ryan's point earlier, talking about how like the movie does split apart and characters start to figure out things individually to make the plot kind of move forward. And I feel like it has to be that way. Like, I feel like it would be lacking, not to say like just because it's Bebop, it would be lacking if one character was able to cut through everything throughout the entirety of the film, but it's an ensemble cast. There's like an ensemble aspect to it where like certain characters can index really hard on things. Like Jet can go talk to the police and figure out what's going on because he's got connections. Ed's a hacker, so obviously we have to show some hacking and we have to make it really fucking weird, which definitely happens. And then Faye has like a certain charisma that she can use to while her way in, though she doesn't really get many opportunities. She gets more just like she gets abducted by Vincent and gets to talk her way out of it in some way. Ish. Yeah, Ryan's making a face.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
he
Vincent
just decides not to
take
kill her, even though he kills everybody else.
Yeah.
Wait, who's Vincent? Are we talking about
He's
Scraggly John Wick?
Yeah, Scraggly John Wick.
Okay.
We're talking about John Stick, and that was that scene where he put the knife and cut her top open.
Oh, yes. And we didn't get to see anything.
Yeah, there wasn't anything. It's rated R. That's my schlock brain talking.
The physics of how her jacket, like her jacket or shirt or whatever the fuck it is, works is already questionable, and it got even more questionable. It's just it's just glued down apparently.
Yeah. But yeah, like if Spike had been able to do everything on his own, it would be like the Batman kind of thing, where it's just like he's figuring out these Dan Brown novels, and it's so easy to cut through it.
Yeah, I mean, Spike really, he just has like intuitions, and he kind of is willing to kind of go wherever. But and I think the show's that way too. Yeah, I agree. And the show that like they all kind of put together their pieces, and that's what the Bebop is effective at figuring out something like this, that the cops are not, or the corporation is not putting all the pieces together the way that they can. Yeah, and also the super intelligent dog can do shit for him every once in a while. That that is kind of the way the crew works. I think it was more of the like, and sometimes the hacking is just like a fix where they can just be like, all right, we need a piece of information, and then it's like, Ed, get on there, and Ed says some weird shit and then shows you something.
Enhance.
Yeah.
Hey, honestly though, like
the fucking tattoo.
It is 50
what if I put
years
this in the microwave?
Yeah. It is 50 years in the future, and they could be using AI to enhance the image. I'll buy that compared to the modern day bullshit.
Yeah. It's not an NCIS where it's like 2013 and they're able to get like 8K resolution out of
a CCTV camera. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I feel like it's done a similar justice, and it makes me think about like other noir films and like what would happen if there was like, if Philip Marlowe had more help, I guess. Like how would you juggle that? It's like really hard without having him need to stumble into everything. But anyways, that kind of ties to like the market sequence when Spike goes looking for beans that the human eye can't see, which is a fun euphemism, I suppose. It's just a creative way to phrase that. And then he meets the doctor who like worked on those. And Dixon, you loved his grenade hand lighter.
He brought that out multiple times in the movie. Yeah.
Anytime to bust it out is a great time.
I was like, where is he carrying that? It's so bulky. That'd be the most inconvenient thing in the world to carry around. And every time you bust it out, some cop's going to shoot you. Like,
yeah.
But if you had one, you would carry it around and show it off whenever you know.
Absolutely.
I'd like, that would just be, what's that massive thing in your pocket? There's a grenade-sized thing jutting out of your pants. What's
Dixon's
going on
gonna order a 44 Magnum lighter. Powerful enough to blow your cigarette's head clean off.
Like, you would have to get a holster for that. Like the grenade, you probably have to clip it to your belt or something. Just walk around with a grenade flying around.
But yeah, like that whole sequence kind of set up this moment where I feel like the world felt so much more lived in. Like we just talked about Howl's Moving Castle, and we talked about the pastiche of like Euro influence that was in it, where you have a village that looks like it's in France. You have a character who speaks with a British accent and one with an American, and maybe occasionally somewhere in between somebody has a different accent there, but all English. And there's not a sign of any other language or kind of culture that intrudes into that. And so like here, instead, you have a world that's like permeated by different languages, and you get to hear them. Like there's that whole sequence on Moroccan Street. Like there's no subtitles for it. You just watch, what is his name? Rashid.
Yeah.
Like walk around and just say hey to people, give people hugs. Like clearly it's somebody that, you know, has some ties in this sort of part of the city. And Spike's just kind of like, all right, I guess I'll trust this guy and like go with him. He seems cool. And he shows up with that big ass clock store and gets like a vase. And that whole sequence, I think that you're just like as befuddled as Spike is, where you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Like the fuck is that? Does he actually know something? Is he trying to sell him some shit?
I was shocked that Spike actually took the vase home with him. I was like, what in the world? Like, it seems like it's a diversion where he just like brings him into this shop and he's like, here, buy this vase. And then he leaves. And like, he does it? Like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And it was a major plot point in the movie.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to like Spike's character being, even if he was like, you're wasting my time, he invests a lot into like, well, I guess I must, I probably have to take this. There must be something here. I think that he values a lot in like the moments that he shares with other people. That's me reading really fucking far into it. But like the fact that he went down all of Moroccan Street watching this dude bro hug everybody, talk to him about selling drugs, then crawled with him through like a small underfloor cabinet that leads into a clock shop and took a vase. He was just like, yeah, there's probably something here. I don't know.
Spike,
Maybe there's beans in this vase.
Spike has that like faith in the unknown Buddhist kind of take on stuff, because he does sometimes like, and that's where he go. We see him where he's like
about the Native American.
Yeah, he's like with that shaman or whatever. In this show, sometimes Spike will go to like a shaman or a what do you call him, hand reader or something like that. So he does sort of have a belief in that kind of stuff. Yeah, a mystic.
Yeah.
So he does sort of have this like the world like brought him that vase for some reason he doesn't know, right? Like this, I was like, they almost bring the dog home just because they can't think of anything else to do with it. So I'm like, that is kind of the way they have stuff.
That's interesting. He seems like a character to me that doesn't believe in anything. Like maybe that's just the voice acting, where he just seems like he really doesn't give a shit about anything, you know? But I don't like that. And I guess I interpreted him as that noir detective who is just like cynical about everything in the world and just doesn't give a shit. But that's interesting to hear that he does believe in some sort of mystical shit.
I don't know if he believes it. Like, that's what's funny. It's like, I don't even know if he believes it, but he will be like, we can't figure anything out. And he'll go like, ask a mind reader, you know, kind of thing, be like, where should I go? And then it turns out to work for him. So it's like never really clear if like it does actually work or if he just sort of stumbles into things.
It's just like he's out of leads and he's like, fuck it, why not? Why don't I go to this palm reader and see what's up?
And really, at this point in the, you know, in Spike's life, he really does just sort of float from thing to thing. Like he does kind of not care. And that's one thing I feel like is a miss watching this movie and having not watched the show, is getting the analogies between Spike and Elektra and Spike and Vincent, the mentions of like, he sees in his dream where Jed is like, oh, Vincent was never really alive, just like you, or he was already dead, right? And you're like, that doesn't make any sense if you don't know that Spike, you know, has his past life where he is supposedly dead to the mafia, and in doing so, he's lost a life and he doesn't know what to do now, and he is kind of like a Walking Dead person. So yeah, Spike's, I don't know, he just kind of goes with the flow.
There's like a whole previous romance and like mobster tragedy that has happened to him that unfolds over the course of like the TV series. And so, yeah, like this happens close to the end of the series. I was actually kind of surprised because like, a lot of the anime films that I've seen, the OVAs that Ryan referred to earlier, have like this kind of, the story happens on like a faraway island. You can almost think of it as a vacation that has the favorite characters or family. Is
this an Adam Sandler movie?
Yeah, it's basically like an Adam Sandler film.
Oh God.
Where they go somewhere, you are with the people that you supposedly love, if you like grown-ups, I guess. And then
I actually do like grown-ups.
Oh, okay. What about grown-ups too?
No, I do not like grown-ups too.
Well, it's like you're grown-ups too. And you have a story or an adventure that happens. All the characters seem to have some kind of growth, like where they're just like, okay, I now understand that this is important. And then they come back. And if you were to like watch the show again, the characters, even if like the animators and the creative directors behind it say like, this is where they were in the show's runtime when this movie happened, you do not feel it at all. There's no integration to it. It's really one of those like, all right, I guess in my head canon, it explains why these characters exist or show up. But beyond that, like nobody mentions it in the show. None of that happens. And since Bebop is structured in such a way that like the entire show, nobody really refers to previous episodes. You can watch it in any order that you want to technically, but there's a plot running underneath the covers of it the entire time. And so while you can watch these serial adventures, you will slowly pick up on the fact that characters have certain growth and progress, and they won't be like, man, we beat that villain of the week last episode or any of that shit. You'll just know that there's like a different weight in their voice or like in their eyes. And if you watch like the full thing through, you'll pick it up. And so this episode fits in between the episode, Dixon, that I showed you called, is it Cowboy Funk, I think was what it was called. And it has like this guy who rides around on a horse who's followed by like a Ennio Morricone score everywhere he goes.
Cowboy Andy.
His name is Andy. Yeah, his name is Andy. And And there's like a fucking Unabomber trying to destroy buildings and make a political statement, and nobody gives a shit because they're all too concerned with Cowboy Andy fucking shit up. And then another episode right after this movie follows is about like Scientology, basically. There's like a Scientology-ish cult.
Is it Scientology or the, like, what were the guys that followed the Hale Bopp comet? Because they have that like bald guy aesthetic of their cult leader.
There's kind of that like this like, oh, join the digital verse and become like the new you that needs to be there. And it's this wild fucking version of it. And to have it like fit in between, this movie doesn't really expose any of that. But when you watch it, I like watched I've like read a few essays on it and watched like a few things about it and like where it fits into place. And I was like, these are compelling enough arguments for me to be like, this is impressive. Because there's a lot of talk about Spike's past life in it with Elektra and with Vincent, and like they're sort of mirroring his character. And if you don't know the show, then you're not going to care and you're not going to see it. But when you watch the show, this fits perfectly in between those episodes where the Cowboy Andy one, there was a lot of people being like, Spike, this is just like you. This Cowboy. He just goes in and he fucks everything up and then he leaves. And Spike's like, that's not like me at all. And then they both go fuck up a building together, trying to compete to see who's a better bounty hunter. And something like this, where like Spike met his physical match in that episode. And then in this one, it's like philosophically his match of like a man who claims he's dead, who's like never lived. And Spike kind of like thinking like how that nihilism could have impacted him, or like what that could have led to. Which I don't think that we've really talked about like the main terrorist plot, or like if it makes any sense or if it matters at all. But
yeah. I was gonna say,
it's trying to just like bomb that city.
Yeah. The movie also gives you the out that it's possibly all a dream. Anyway,
oh, you mean at the very end?
Yeah,
when it asks you.
Yeah, it kind of gives you an opportunity to be like, maybe Spike just dripped all this shit anyway, because it would explain why he sees a couple things that don't make quite sense. But often, weirdly, with anime, like they just make a movie and you have no idea. Like it fits in a place, but you have no idea if it really happened or not until later they clarify it. So, and they'll make movies that like conflict with each other. Like the Japanese audience is just used to like, it doesn't need to really truly make sense. Like they're already okay with there being multiple canon that conflicts, like whatever. As long as the characters kind of are the same, it's fine.
Yeah, we had to use the C word. I'm sorry, Dixon.
Yeah.
Know how much you're not a fan of canon.
I'm out.
Just the canon
unless
movies.
It's canon films.
Movies.
Yeah, canon films. Yeah, Death Wish, get him in here.
If Chuck Norris is in it, I'm there.
Or JCVD.
Oh yes.
Well, yeah. Were there any moments? I guess Dixon, having this been, your second experience with Cowboy Bebop, and a much longer one at that, and something that's made for like theatrical release. Is there anything like particular that sticks out that like you feel would be memorable for you? Like, is there anything that really made a lasting impression?
I mean, I think the style is what sticks with me the most. Like the cool melding of noir and the Western, and kind of, there's kind of some like spy stuff and kind of the evil corporate backing and all that stuff kind of coming together into one thing was really interesting. And the animation is really cool, and just all the action sequences look really great. It made me want to go watch a really good noir, and I haven't had a chance to do that yet, so I may do that this week at some point. But yeah, that was kind of my main takeaway from it, was just the vivid, kind of unique nature of the animation and just the overall styles melding together.
And you also learned what makes a stew, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, stew mix.
On
I was
aisle
like,
3?
Broth? Nope, stew mix. Okay. I don't know what that is, but whatever. Like chili powder or something? I don't know.
I think it's just like that dude doesn't even know what a stew is anymore.
Right. Is it like a freeze-dried packet of like meat and vegetables that you just like dump in some boiling water?
I'm assuming
Bouillon
it's like
cubes.
a ramen packet.
Yeah.
Bouillon.
Well, they make
cube.
their curry. Japanese curry comes in this little, like, almost like bouillon chunks to make the curry. So yeah, I guess maybe it's the same thing.
That dude doesn't know how stews are made.
I do
He's
like
just
their
just put a cube in there.
Yeah, you got a stew going.
Yeah.
I do like their future noodle cups that are like self-heating
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that shit was rad. It's about those minor conveniences when it comes to the future, where like that make this movie and the world feel a lot more believable. Was when I was like, oh, Moroccan Street, people are still selling like vases in the future, and I was like, oh hell
Cuckoo
yeah,
clocks.
like I could easily see this, yeah, cuckoo clocks and whatever. And then it's just like every so often there's like, all right, there is a video phone. Okay, there is like a ramen cup that you pull a string and it heats everything inside of it. Like those really minor conveniences, but the medical corporations are still fucking everybody over.
Oh yeah.
And there's like, they've got private military now, which is even more fun. Yeah, the Martian Pinkertons. Who knows?
Yeah, there's certainly like a level, an even stronger have and have not level in the Cowboy Bebop universe, because there are these companies that have like whatever they want, and people with really great technology. You do see people who are like ridiculously rich, and then you see a lot of people who are just barely getting by and like can't go anywhere or work really shitty, dangerous jobs.
Yeah, at times there's like feelings of in the movie of like walking through like a favela and like you just see like kids playing soccer in like dirty streets and like kicking it around corners and stuff. There's so many little nuances and details to the atmosphere that like lend to it having that life. And I've again, like having just watched Howl's Moving Castle and thinking about the way that like there's not really a lot of time to traverse the streets in Howl, and it doesn't really give you that same sense of you're like, you understand there's two countries warring, two nations and that. I feel like Bebop really just like settles in and like sinks into one particular like atmosphere at a time. And here has way more of like, an Arabic culture to it. Like it's trying to conjure so much with that Moroccan street. It's so memorable. Hell, even like the informant, the dude with the grenade fire fucking lighter or whatever, he like leaves a conversation by sitting on a rail and sliding out of frame.
Yeah.
like many other people just probably like walk away while saying some shit that's cool, but he's just like, all right, I'm out. Like hops on and goes.
Ass grind.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked. I know we mentioned at the top of it, like the score, like the Cowboy Bebop score is always just good. In the movie in particular, has like a lot more of these kinds of like operatic moments, and there's like really, especially when they're raiding the water treatment plant to try to find the terrorist bomb, and there's just like this kind of choir that's singing as the officers are getting closer and closer to where the bomb isn't, like these cool moments. I'm kind of curious if y'all had any particular piece of the score that you picked up on that you were like, I noticed that this really stood out in a scene, or if it all felt like it perfectly gelled and you were like, just part of the experience.
It is slightly different from the Bebop show. This is actually one of my like mild complaints with the movie. There's a lot more lyrical, and you're right, kind of either choral opera or there's just straight up like a lot of lyrics. It's much more like the closing theme to Bebop, or there's like what is it, Walk in the Rain, like a few things like that that are in the show. But for the most part, the show is much more jazz and bebop, obviously, in its and very much like the freestyle jazz. And I do miss that there's not a single like true over the top jazz song in this that I feel like should be there. That's part of the formula. It's not to say the music is bad. Like I really do like the open, like after the open, we get the title sequence showing the city and the music and stuff that's there. I really appreciate. And the score's good. Like it fits in everywhere. It's just like a little minor that's like not exactly like the show.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I thought the score was really good and worked perfectly with the movie. I actually watched another episode of the show today before I came over here to kind of like refresh my memory on the aesthetics and things like that. And I liked the score a lot more in that episode of the show. It was like just very, very jazzy, and it felt almost more aggressive in the show than it does in the movie. And yeah, I don't know why they went away from that aesthetic. Maybe they were trying to create a different vibe in the movie than what they were doing in the episodes. But I did like it a lot. Like the score works really well. It's definitely like a strong point of the movie for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's like one of those things where I guess they probably had the check and they were like, we should make something new. And I guess if we're going to do, I think that like, also just fun fact, this was banned in Iran and Iraq because it had subject matter of terrorism, which when I look at it, I'm like, it's a white dude who is supposed to look like Bob Dylan who's doing the terror. But okay. It has like Moroccan street.
Yeah, now I'm like, it came out in 2001. I am now remembering. So yeah, there is a little bit of like,
yeah, I could see there being some sensitivity around that. And like, a lot of things are banned in Iran and Iraq. That's not super surprising, but
but that was one of the things where I was just like, there's not a whole lot of like references. It takes place on Mars in 2071. Like, I don't know. But anyways, that's an aside. So yeah, I enjoyed the score as well. Like I brought it up because I was like, yeah, it's completely different than the show has. And the show had to be, I think it's more interesting to me that like a 26 episode anime has full jazz score. Like if you find the soundtrack online, it's just fucking great to listen to and like right around. It really makes you feel like hyped up. And then to have it go from that to what is in the movie, which has completely different style to it and is played at times like way slower, has like moments that'll just kind of linger in what it is. Whereas the show's like, all right, we're having it. Like here's a dog fight. Like kick up the trumpets like really hard, or like here's a fist fight. Let's do bass. Like let's really double down.
Or it'll play like a blues, like a real down.
There'll be a blues, whenever
to bring you down and shit too. Yeah.
It'll just hit. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I'm like, glad it exists. I'm glad that they did the score for the movie the way it is. It's not bad. It obviously fits really well with it. But yeah, I would welcome a third album if they want to make something else. They don't have to make a movie for it, but it's just one of those things where like the Seatbelts did the score for the show and the movie. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, I got to follow the Seatbelts after this.
Yeah.
This sounds fucking great. So yeah. Do we have to talk about the live action Bebop?
No, I would like to talk about Vincent's motives. I'd rather talk about that.
Let's do that. All right, everybody. You heard Brian's review for Cowboy Bebop, the Netflix live action. That's a refute on a main discussion.
Is John Cho in that?
John Cho is in that. Yes.
Yeah,
so
I never saw that. But.
The style is kind of there in the show, but it sort of removes the heart. The casting's good. Like it kind of works. The music is good because they brought back, the original sounds and artists. But it tries to explore a character that doesn't need exploring for no reason, because it wants to fit to the American archetype of like, we follow a plot thread, which the anime does not give a shit about. And then in doing so, it then fails to fill in the main characters in the way that they're supposed to in touching ways. Yeah, it's just a really strange way to do that adaptation, to just completely jerk the soul out of it. So that's all I have to say about that.
There's a YouTube video I watched called Cowboy Bebop Netflix, the Seinfeld edition or some shit. And it just puts a laugh track on one scene from that show. And it demonstrates successfully in like a minute and 30 seconds everything wrong with it by just adding that laugh track. Because it's like Joss Whedon jokes.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like that level of like, these stoic characters are just eating at a regular table and making like jokes, and one of them's like, it was totally nutbags. Like they say that it was nutbags, and I'm like, nobody in this fucking movie and nobody in that show would ever say something was nutbags.
Yeah, and like,
but yeah, anyways,
the dialogue comedy is not the modern dialogue, obviously, because this is from the late 90s originally. But the comedy tends to come much more from like the situations. Like there is some talking about noodles and not getting to eat beef or whatever, and sometimes they kind of take a few digs at each other. Like that happens within it, but as far as the TV show is concerned, like if you want your comedy, it's when they're all fucking tripping on mushrooms. Or
that's an episode you should see, Dixon.
Yeah, or the thing in the fridge that they left in there for too long becomes sentient, or
that's fucking
like that's more where the sort of like comedy can come into play. Or even like when the early on episode where they get Ein, the data dog, the comedy is in like the chase scene. It's just this elongated chase scene through, and there's a little bit here. I would say a good example is when they're doing the chase scene where Vincent is getting on the train. and Elektra's chasing him, and Spike is chasing Elektra. And there's kind of some like little comedy moments within there and sort of action comedy, or she like tells the guy like stay at the car, like watch the car, like things like that are more of the like funny moments in it than needing to be like Avengers funny.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Avengers funny is what
That's an oxymoron, John. Come on.
But yeah, anyways, okay, so that's all we had to say for the live action Cowboy Bebop, folks. Don't watch it. Just watch the OG. Yeah, anyways, you wanted to talk about Vincent's motivations, Ryan?
Yeah, so we sort of learned that Vincent, like we know that he was experimented on and that he got an anti-nanobot
Injection
something.
vaccine.
Yeah, let's not think about how that works. Honestly, how the nanobots work is whatever anyway. And so he's
got warring nanobots inside him that fight the invading nanobots.
And I guess through some of this testing, he's amnesiac and kind of doesn't remember anything, it appears.
And he sees glowing butterflies everywhere now.
Yeah, and he sees glowing butterflies all over the place. So then he decides to release the nanobots that I don't think were used for testing on him, right? He just finds out that the company was making these and they're fucking dangerous. And he's just going to let them out and kill everyone on Mars because ... something. We're all in purgatory, or then I'll get to die too. Which then he just gets
seems
shot.
To be
so
losing his grip
matter.
on reality
Yeah.
at all. I know he's like, are the butterflies real or are you real? And like, tell me. He's like, I think he's talking to Spike at the end, right? He's like, tell me what's real. I don't even know anymore.
Like,
and it seems like he's kind of trying to take everybody down with him.
Yeah, there just becomes like that. I feel like his motivation throughout all of it is to solidify what's real by killing everything. He's like, all right, if I release this and this all happens, then maybe I'll know what actually is real, or I'll have eliminated what I think is fake in this really fucking weird, like he is just at this point off the deep end and in like a severe state of psychosis where he's seen those, which the butterfly reveal sequences are so fucking cool. Like I think each time
cool
that
effects,
we see a butterfly, those butterflies are through like a POV shot where it's like, first we get, Sporky Donkey works, or he dies, whatever the fuck his name is. He just like eats it, and Faye walks in and immediately has that same reaction where another moment where we learn kind of the rules, I guess, of the weapon that's at use, where it's like, okay, these like microbots, if they're dispersed through a room, they would dissipate slower than if they were dispersed on like a highway where they've killed everybody. And Faye immediately starts like freaking out and having this moment of like, we get to see the blurred vision, and they do shots like that too in the show, which is always cool to just like the use of POV, even in the most small moments of action here. It's like, I hesitate to bring up Bresson in a way, but in a way it does have this direct like insight into action where like Bresson will show like the handshake as a result of violence. And like in Bebop, the point of view is the point of violence. Like that's where you would see things. So like even at the beginning when Spike's coming up to the convenience store, he headbutts a dude in front of the store, and we see, or he like kicks him. We don't see his foot make contact. We see the point of view of eyes looking down, up to the sky, being completely dazed. And like that moment of like, that's how you connect with a character instantaneous, even if you don't know who they are, like using your eyes and seeing that way. So like Faye seeing a glimpse of a butterfly and it doesn't even stay. Like we don't follow the butterfly at all. It gets out of view pretty fast. Was like an enticing moment. And then at the end, Spike sees like, hundreds of them for a moment, and then they just dissipate. Just like really fucking cool way to show, here's how like toxic gas is dispersing. Here's how this character is enacting their plan. But anyways, I got on that tangent from talking about Vincent.
Yeah.
Like maybe guessing that if he killed everybody, it would make things real. It would ground him.
The noir assassin butterfly combo reminds me a lot of Branded to Kill.
Yeah. I was thinking about Joe Shashido, our favorite chipmunk chinked band.
Yeah.
yeah, like what is I don't know. Did you have anything for that, Dixon? Did it remind you?
No,
of
I
it,
was
or
just
did it
like, as you were talking about, I was like, you know what? That
Yeah.
reminds me a lot of Branded to
Pretty-
Kill.
I mean,
and I'm sure there was some influence there. Like that's also a Japanese film, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's
Yeah.
a influence of like the metaphor of like what a butterfly is, where it is this like fragile, frail entity that can die pretty easily. And Branded to Kill, if I remember correctly, there was like a whole wall of them like pinned.
They're like,
Yeah,
each other or
there's-
they were
something.
like all hung from the ceiling
Yeah,
in
where
one
she-
apartment.
Yeah.
There's like that. You're just surrounded by that frailty and that beauty. And in this, it's like, so they're all fleeting. They all continue to fly. And usually when you see them as the observer, not Vincent, I'm sure he says he sees them all the time. So I guess he just lives in this constant daze. But you see them and they just disintegrate constantly. Like
Yeah.
at the moment that somebody sees one, it just flutters away.
And certainly the hallucination or the hallucinations that Vincent may have that are beyond the butterflies, I do get the idea of like, my mind is showing me butterflies, but you're saying they're not there, but I'm seeing these other things. Like, which one can I trust? Like, what is the
What is your
reality that they
reality?
bring up? And then definitely a reference to the philosophical, and I forget who it is, that say that he dreamt of being a butterfly and then he woke up and was a human, and he's like, which one? Like, which one's the dream? Am I the butterfly dreaming of being a man, or am I man dreaming of being a butterfly? Like, how can you know? And it's interesting, right? Because you like Spike's world of like what's reality, and you know what was his life before and what is his life now? Is he in a purgatory himself between life and death? Is definitely something that's kind of in the show thematically. I just don't get why. Like, the truck was highly effective. Why do we have to go to this convoluted Halloween jack-o'-lantern?
Yeah.
Because he wants to cover the whole city in it, Ryan.
Just
Not
more
because
trucks. The trucks seem to work perfectly fine.
That's too much work.
They're gonna be
They
looking for
caught on
trucks.
to the truck. What was the other thing? Like one of the cops says that like, oh, the big pharma doesn't want to investigate it. They like buried the truck incident basically immediately.
Yeah.
Because it was
They're
their
just
truck
like-
that got stolen. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like they wouldn't send more trucks out, Ryan. Come on.
I honestly,
You
like, I can
gotta-
get that, like, now everyone's going to be looking at the trucks, and they looked at the water supply. So
Yeah.
you do have to come up with, it's like, in that, like, second day afterwards, they had no fucking clue what was even going on. Like, that was your chance. You would have wait a week and a half to Halloween to fucking enact your more
Yeah.
complicated version of your plan.
Just get some old crop dusting planes and just go for it. Just spray
It
it
worked- it
everywhere.
worked just fine
I
for
love
those,
those
yeah.
old dudes.
Mhm.
The old dudes who fly those crop dusting planes are the real heroes of this movie.
And those, speaking of recurring characters, those fucking three old guys show up in the show all the time. And I do like that here they act like they make some mention of like, oh, it'd be nice to travel to space. And I'm like, motherfucker, you've been on like 9 different planets throughout the course of the show. You
they
just
don't know
don't
what
remember.
space is.
Are they on a porch playing cards in every single
Pretty much.
They actually
yeah.
are, yeah.
planet
Yep.
that they're on?
They
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
and the one old dude that has like clearly has dementia or some kind of memory loss. He has the same shit. In one episode, they explain that away as him being he like got so stoned for such a long time because they were like, I remember when we were planting beans back on this farm, and he's like, we did. We planted those beans like there was no tomorrow. And they're like, you were planting crops of a different kind. And he's just like, yep, I was. Like, fucking knows. Yeah, I love that. Seeing those recurring characters in this feels like a novelty. Like, Dixon, you probably didn't register it, but like those old guys are fun. The what is his name? Laughing Bull, who is the like he's not a Native American, he's a Native Martian or I don't know, mystic dude, whatever.
Are there native Martians?
Yeah, I
He
guess
has
if
become
the
a
guy's
native
in
Martian.
Little Morocco or Moroccan, then I guess he's Native American.
Yeah.
I suppose. But yeah, him giving his he always
brought a
calls
wolf
Spike
to
swimming
Mars?
bird. Yeah, he brings a whole wolf to Mars. calls Spike swimming bird. He's in other episodes. There's just like a good number of recurring characters in this movie that none of them turn to camera and wink and are like, "It's me." It's just like those old dudes are fucking like hilarious. Just how senile they are. And all right, I guess Spike was saved by a mystic. Like, sure, that kind of shit. Yeah. Was there anything else behind Vincent's motivations that we wanted to talk about? Did we even really
No,
scrape them?
I do wonder that there's the question of like Elektra having the anti-nanobites. That's never really.
That's what sex does for you.
I guess,
Yeah.
but then Vincent doesn't remember her.
Sexually transmitted,
Yeah.
sexually
that's what
transmitted
happened, yeah.
vaccinations.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
absolutely feel that
STVs.
that's the insinuation, but Vincent doesn't remember her until the very end.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, he didn't know whether that they have a
Yeah.
relationship before the anti-nanobites or only after the anti-nanobites, and he just doesn't remember either or both. Or that's also not entirely clear.
Yeah. Honestly, the only thing I took away from it was that we need to spend more time investing into STVs.
Yeah,
That's the best way
exactly.
to vaccinate the population.
So like, wonder if there's any implications to everyone on Mars now being anti-nanobited. Like,
yeah.
How are we going to infiltrate the Catholic priest population, though? What are we going to do? What are we going to do with that?
I don't even want to touch that. Unlike the priests.
Ooh.
Oh, there we go.
I'm curious to ask you guys, like, I feel like TV shows that turn into movies, a lot of times they don't work. I talked about the Simpsons movie a week or two ago, and I think that's one of the examples that does work really well. And that like, Simpsons movie to me feels like a good, solid Simpsons episode, kind of spread out longer. It sounds like that's how you guys kind of feel about the Cowboy Bebop movie. Is that how you feel about it? And also, how do you feel like, what are your general feelings about TV shows that do movies, and how do you think this stacks up comparatively?
I feel like it nails being a longer episode. As far as like, I can compare it in my, to other Japanese anime movies, which are really common, like the Dragon Ball movie earlier this year. Like they put one out every few years, like the One Piece movie and the Demon Slayer movie were like even really did well in the States, much less like gigantic hits in Japan. Because people kind of just want to see more of the characters they love, even if the show is in, or maybe even especially if the show is ended, and kind of don't really care, like, if it even makes sense. A lot of times the movies are pretty crap compared to the show. A few times are good, but it does run into this problem of, like, with the anime, it always has to live on its own somewhat enough that anyone can come in and watch it, though I'll say the recent Dragon Ball movie did not give a fuck if you knew the history of Dragon Ball. It went hard into the paint. But it can't mess with the show. Like it has, that's really where it is like there aren't necessarily implications that can come back to the show. So it's sort of like any character that gets introduced will forever be forgotten. They'll only exist within that movie, even if they're like the most powerful thing they've ever met until this point. They're never talked of again, right? Because it's like, well, that was in the movie and we just put it aside. So the Bebop movie, like, it definitely works where it is a longer episode. It is exactly like what Bebop is like. The fact that it's after the show and is kind of coming back to all of it and really honestly doesn't miss a beat, I feel like is good. A lot of times I feel like when things come back or movies later, you look at like these seasons that are not coming back of shows from forever ago, fucking Frasier or whatever. They don't even remember how they made the show. Like, and no one involved is there except for Frasier. And like it just can never be the thing. Like the soul is completely removed. And like Arrested Development or Family Guy, I feel like they came back and they kind of just didn't remember what made it work, where this knows what made Cowboy Bebop work.
Yeah, I 100%. I'm on that same exact page of like, it much like the Simpsons movie, I think it does a good service to the source material and has, the same kind of snappy writing, the same investment in the time that's put into the characters and to the score. Like, I mean, on its own, like standing on its own, the Simpsons movie can be fun for anybody who hasn't watched the show because the jokes are solid.
Mm-hmm.
Bebop has this kind of uphill battle of like getting you to recognize the world, an ensemble cast, a threat, a bigger threat, like some world building that goes in between that as well. With the rest of just like getting you familiar with the world itself too, is like, all right, what are the rules for all of this? Like, how do I even understand this? How does this stand on its own? Where Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, both like 2049 especially gets to ape off of a world that exists, but Blade Runner had to stand up like so many different proper nouns and there's so much that's required with it
Mhm.
to try to get going. That like I feel like Bebop has the same thing of like, it doesn't, while it does serve the source material, I feel like it also tries to bridge that gap of like connecting with new audiences with like mainstream views. And that's sort of like that. The more interesting part of it is I feel like it does it well enough. It doesn't do it like it doesn't do like a full service to a newcomer to be like, okay, I understand everything about this, but
Yeah.
maybe it serves as a good entry point and a good, like I was looking over some IMDb facts and some Wikipedia reception stuff that they were talking about how like some critics gave it like 2 out of 5 stars and said that it wasn't that great of a movie, that like the animation was impressive enough, but that it was flat. And other critics were like 4 out of 5. I fucking loved it. I thought that the animation was fantastically done and like the replication of certain film shots and like the use of style just elevated it, that it didn't need these other aspects to its story. And so it comes down to this point of like, where do you really fall when you see this kind of blend of genre? Like, how do you feel about it? But for me as a fan, like I fucking loved it. I had a good time out of it. I remember a friend who felt differently that I knew when I was a young kid, when I went and saw this movie or talked with him about it. He was smoking a cigarette and I thought he was cool because he was 12. And I was like, how can you do that? And then he was like, yeah, that movie's
Did you
okay.
light it with a grenade?
He didn't.
That'd be awesome.
That would have been the coolest moment in my life. But he was like,
Where did you get that?
I could tell that he was doing cigarettes. He was smoking cigarettes because he had anger issues, because he turned around and punched a brick wall talking about the Cowboy Bebop movie and how it didn't do enough of a service. And he like busted his fucking hand on that wall. It was like the only time that I've come up against somebody who's like that. I was just like, I liked it. I don't know what to say.
Did he break his hand?
He did not break his hand. He just had bloody knuckles from the impact. But just like, dude, don't get so worked up.
So I feel like every baseball season, there's one pitcher that gets really mad and like punches the wall or punches a water cooler and then breaks his hand and is out for the rest of the season. Yeah.
Always just happens. But yeah, so I'm not like him. I wouldn't punch a wall over this movie. I thought it was pretty fun, and I think it's a cool entry point for other folks. I thought it did a good service to the characters I love. So
cool.
Yeah, I can say at the same time, I'm like, yeah, it's really good and does a good job of the show, but I'm like, I also enjoy the Tenchi Muyo movies. So like I can enjoy hot trash just because I like I'm a fan of the show or whatever. So I don't even know if my point's valid.
Yeah.
Ryan, your points are never valid.
Yeah.
Dixon has clearly invalidated both of our points. He continues to win the presidential elections by an 89% vote majority. Wow, Dixon, I wonder how that happens for this podcast.
We're going to count all the legal votes, folks.
When 2/3 of us is a majority.
Stop voting when he wins.
Anyways.
Don't stop counting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, was there anything else y'all wanted to add for this?
I think that's all I got.
All right. Well, there we go. Well, I, having just talked about how much I really enjoyed it, would recommend it. But Ryan, would you recommend it?
Yeah, I would recommend it. In the case that you're a fan of Cowboy Bebop and haven't seen it, fucking watch it. There's absolutely no reason, and you will like it because it is just more of it. Coming in blind, I think it's a fair entry point. I kind of have the feeling of, I mentioned One Piece, and it's like 1,000 fucking episodes, and I don't know how many issues of the comic at this point. That if you want to get into something like that, like American comics or wrestling, the best thing to do is just like start watching. And if you want to find out something, you can go back and start to fill in the pieces or fill in the gaps. But you will never feel like you can catch up or get into it or whatever if you don't just like have something in front of you and just watch it. Don't be bothered by it. Now, Cowboy Bebop is not long. It's only 26 episodes and like a special. So it's really easy to get through. Yeah. And they're really fast to work through. You should do that. Like anyone that has no familiarity with Cowboy Bebop, like you absolutely should watch it. It's excellent for a Western audience as well. I think it's one of the most accessible anime to an American audience, and is wildly popular in the States for that reason. And yeah, the movie is kind of just like more of the same. So I really do. I recommend it as well.
Yeah. Dixon, would you?
Yes, I would. For all the reasons we've discussed, it's just cool. Like the styles all coming together, the score. It's a really fun watch. I had no real context going in and had a good time with it. So
Awesome.
We have talked about dorm room poster movies in the past or whatever, and so I have to be fully upfront that I had Spike Spiegel posters, legitimately at least one in my dorm room. So that's at least where I stand, and I've definitely used images like from this movie specifically on like online things for years. Like it's that much to me.
Yeah. On the plus side, I can say Spike Spiegel is definitely no Travis Bickle. That dude, Spike's not nearly as warped as Travis.
Travis is way cooler.
Yeah.
Than Spike.
He does way more cool shit.
But could he wear a suit the entire time he was fighting? That's gotta be. It's pretty
Could
tough.
Spike Spiegel put whiskey on his Cheerios in the morning?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
He doesn't have enough money
Gentlemen,
for whiskey.
please. There's no fighting in the war room. But yeah, well, that'll wrap it up for us here at Afterthoughts. I think it's time we blow this scene. So yeah, I have been your host, John Garcia. With me, as always,
Ryan King. See you, Space Cowboy.
and
Michael Dixon, thanks for putting up with our bullshit.
hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.